Hello, everybody. Welcome back to special business meeting. We are on item 4A1. This is the District of Squamish 2025 to 2029 5-year financial plan, bylaw number 3137 2024, and is the spring amendment bylaw. And I will turn it over to staff to run us through the important pieces of this.
Great. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Laura Turner, Director of Financial Planning and Reporting, and I'm joined today by Heather Boxford, General Manager of Finance, Procurement and IT, and Sarah Bailey, Acting Director of Facilities Planning and Construction. We also have several budget managers in council chambers and available online to help answer any project-specific questions. We're here with you today to bring forward 3 readings of the 2025 to 2029 Financial Plan Spring Amendment Bylaw. On an annual basis, during Q1, staff review the current financial plan and recommend amendments to address operating or project budget changes. For operating budgets, these changes may be due to inflationary cost increases, labor contract changes, or changes to revenue and expense forecasts. Amendments to project budgets are typically due to change in funding availability, such as unsuccessful grant applications or increased grant funds for existing initiatives, cost escalation or reduction, changes to project scope where timelines or costs have materially changed, or changes to staff capacity resulting in delayed project delivery or project cancellation. Based on the recommended amendments to the district's operating budget and special operating projects, the net tax impact is a reduction of $12,000 in 2025. This includes a net increase of $20,000 in the operating budget and a net reduction of $32,000 in special operating projects. We'll now look at each of these components in more detail. Summarized here and detailed in the report to council are the recommended amendments to the district's operating budget. This includes increased tax revenue of $1.5 million from Class 4 Major Industry, or WLNG. At the February 18th special business meeting, Council directed staff to include this revenue in the spring amendment and transfer it to the Public Protective Services provision. Therefore, there's no tax impact. Next, an increase of $20,000 to the library budget for operations, which is funded from taxation. And finally, increased expenses of $150,000 as contribution to Housing Squamish, which will be funded by the Affordable Housing Reserve. Summarized here are the recommended amendments to special operating projects, which result in a net reduction to tax of $32,000 in 2025. Details of these changes can be found in attachment 1 and includes 4 grant-funded projects, which received additional funding totaling $90,000 in 2025. This increased revenue, along with the associated program expenses, are included in the amendment. The Circular Economy Implementation Project was awarded partial funding under the Rural Economic Diversification and Infrastructure Program. As a result, a reduction of program costs is recommended in the amendment, as well as a reduction in funding sources. As a portion of this project is funded by the district, this results in a tax reduction of $32,000. And lastly, the Marine Impact Study and Water Loss Management Study have revised timelines based on staff capacity. Both projects have been moved to 2026 and will be funded by reserve. Details of capital project amendments can be found in attachment 2 of the report to council and are summarized here. Based on recommended amendments, capital project costs will have a net decrease of $3.6 million in 2025. The amendments can be broken down into 4 categories, including changes due to available funding of $2.8 million. This is mainly due to unanticipated grant funding for the Loggers East drainage diversion pipe construction. Changes due to cost escalation of $298,000. This is mainly due to unexpected cost increases to fleet and the Valley Cliff Child Care Facility. Changes due to revised scope of project of $1.4 million, mainly due to amendment for the Brennan Park Recreation Center upgrade. and changes due to revised project timelines, which results in a reduction of 8 million in 2025. And this is mainly due to the Mamquam Bridge Deck Resurfacing Project moving to 2026 to create efficiencies with other capital projects. It's important to note that the total capital budget reduction in 2025 will have no tax impact as these projects are not funded by taxation. I'll now turn it over to Sarah Bailey to speak to the Brennan Park Rec Center upgrade project.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Bailey, Director of Engineering, Acting Director of Facilities Planning and Construction. I'm here to provide a brief summary on the current budget status of the Brennan Park retrofit upgrade project. On the slide, you can see a summary of where we're currently at. Work to date completed is around 8 million. We are proposing 355,000 from other projects within our financial plan to be transferred over to this larger project. We have 13 million remaining on our current construction contract. The biggest change is that we're proposing additional owner-held contingency of 1.1 million, which is to bring the project contingency up to a total of 15%, which is in alignment with industry standard practice for retrofits on this scale. It's important to note that's written in the report to council that the construction team and the IPD contract is holding 6.5%. So 8.5% would bring us up to 15% total. We have costs that are estimated outside of the IPD contract to be 508,000 for a forecasted total, including those credits of 355 of $22.9 million, ending up with a shortfall of approximately $1.2 million. And that's what we're looking to for council today in this bylaw amendment.
Great. Just one last thing I'd like to note before I conclude the presentation is that under section 7 for next steps, it should read a copy will be provided to the Ministry of Housing and Municipal Affairs, not the Ministry of Community, Sport and Cultural Development. So I apologize for the error. And I'll now turn it back to Mayor and Council for discussion.
Thank you very much. Council, questions? Wants to get us started here? Councilor Pettingill.
Sure, thanks. A few things. During agenda planning, and I may have misunderstood, had the sense that there was some time sensitivity to this, but as reflecting back, we did approve our budget in December. So I just want to make sure I'm clear. Is there any sort of external time pressure to approve this, or and what would that be?
26. Yeah. So we're legislated to submit the budget amendments to the ministry by May 15th each year, which means it would have to be adopted on the May 6th date there. So that would go along with the tax rate bylaw as well.
Yep, go ahead, Councilor.
So my understanding, and maybe this is where I needed clarity, that you have to have your budget approved by that day, which we have done to my mind. And then throughout the year, you can make amendments sort of as needed. So I feel like I'm missing something in that.
Go, sure.
Thank you for the question through the chair. That's correct. So with the spring amendment, if there's no tax implications, you have to have your tax rate bylaw submitted by May 14th. So if there's no tax implications, then it would just be a regular amendment. Because there's a tax implication, we do have to get that in before the tax rate bylaw.
Okay, that's helpful. I guess a couple other things. I'm looking at some of the work around Finch, and it looks like it's tied to a grant and so on, which underpinning this seems to be a significant amount of density increase in that area. I've sort of expressed some of my concerns. So when do we and how do we gain an understanding of what level of density is appropriate given the risk that is proposed for that area, i.e. the pipeline? Because I guess in my mind, it's not clear to me that we should be making significant investments in that whole area without an understanding of how much development we can support along that corridor.
Is there someone that wants to take a stab at that question? I think this is about, to me, this is about the financial implications of decisions that we've made already and making sure that they're in the right place process-wise. So I don't know that we're going to get that, it's appropriate to get that broad an answer here, but do you want to kind of narrow in on this?
Yeah, it seemed, unless I misunderstood, some Finch specific increases for works there. No mention of Fortis, but I had understood they're paying or at least driving some of this, or there's some coordination there. And so I'm just wondering though, should we be spending anything here on those projects, on those increases at this point?
I think that's likely a question for council. Why don't we turn that into a question about the specific Finch Drive items so we can understand them and see if there's a tie in that way? So could someone speak to the changes that are there for the Canadian Housing Infrastructure Fund project on Finch? Could someone speak to what that project is?
Thank you. Through the chair, so we do have a neighborhood plan for the Finch area in place, which kind of outlines the maximum densities that the area could see. So from a planning perspective, we have a good idea of what the ultimate build out will look like. But staff would have to dig into the plan to pull out those specific numbers if that's what council is looking for.
I think the question I had was this particular, in the report, it says the Finch Drive Road reconstruction, Loggers East drainage diversion pipe construction, that project. We speak to what that accomplishes and the need for that project.
Through the mayor, I'll attempt to answer this question. This project is required for the density that's anticipated with the neighborhood plan, and is not triggered or required because of the Eagle Mountain pipeline.
Okay, so yeah, go ahead, Councilor Pringle.
No, but I guess my understanding or framing of this is that when we approved the plan, the pipeline was not a certainty. And for me, that pipeline and our understanding thereof changes significantly my comfort level with density and so on, and therefore spending to support that level of density. And so I'm trying to wrap my head around, I guess back to my question of when we would, or how we would understand that risk to see, does this density actually still make sense? Because I'm not actually sure it does from everything I've read so far. And so I don't know that I can justify the grant application and the related spending. And so is there a reason, like, so Fortis is proposed, I guess, try to frame it this way, to do some work in the road, which regardless of what we do with density and so on, we may also need to do some work. Is there an interaction there, or what is that interaction? What's the bare minimum we would need to do given what they're planning to do? Or is what they're doing actually irrelevant completely to this and they're not going to disturb something that we have to fix?
Who's best suited to comment on that?
Through the chair, the work that needs to be done in relation to the storm main on Finch and Industrial needs to be done regardless of whether Fortis is going through the area or not. They won't be causing us any extra work. It's just about the timing of that work.
Okay, I'll move on. I'll come back to you. Councillor Stoner.
Just to pick up on my council colleague's question, is there any efficiencies that are gained with the $1.8 million project that's currently in the 5-year financial plan for Finch Drive and this project?
We have Dave Marrow stepping forward.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Dave Marrow, Director of Development Engineering. While it's not my project, I do have some history and information on the file. So the work required on Finch largely is not due to additional density. The integrated stormwater management plan for the area identified deficiencies in the stormwater infrastructure. So the stormwater work or the project is essentially to address existing issues. The timing, as Ms. Vengi alluded to, is to ensure that the infrastructure is put in before the pipeline goes through. If we were to wait until after the pipeline went through, there would be more costs associated with dealing in proximity to the pipeline and installing services above or below that gas main at the time. Excuse me.
Okay, Councillor Stoner, do you have a follow-up or an additional question?
I have some additional questions on other topics. I'm just wondering if staff can speak to how much money is in the airport reserve fund. So there's a few projects that are being shifted. I'm just curious, as proposed, how much money is left in the reserve?
I'm sure through the chair. The opening balance for 2025 is about 210,000. And then with a projected balance at the end of the year of 120,000 after funding those projects.
And can you remind me what the funding source is for that reserve?
A surplus within their call center. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And then I am curious about the additional 15,000 that's being requested for the cricket pitch. And I'm just wondering if someone can speak to why it's going to cost $60,000 to install a cricket pitch.
Thank you. Through the mayor, Megan Latimer, General Manager of Community Services. So the cost estimate for the cricket pitch was actually based on recommendations from an engineering report that was done last year to look at the viability of the cricket pitch. And this was a Class D estimate. And then has since been backed up by quotes received from different vendors in terms of the work that would have to be done there. So staff have been working very closely with the Squamish Cricket Club to understand the requirements for the project, as well as reaching out to other municipalities as well to understand best practices for construction of the cricket pitch. The 15,000 represents a few different things, some additional contingency, just because this is a new project for the district. We haven't built cricket pitches before. It's also taking into account that the contribution from the cricket club was less than originally thought in terms of grant funding from their side. So this covers some of the shortfall there as well.
Thank you for that clarity. And then I had one other, if I might, Mayor. If we go back to the March 25th meeting where we reviewed the Q4 variances and carry forwards, there was a request for almost $600,000 in funding from the CMHC Housing Accelerator Fund to be carried over. And at that time, we discussed seeing in the spring budget amendment how staff are proposing to spend that money going forward, but I don't see anything in the amendment. So I'm just wondering if staff can speak to when we will see a proposal for that $600,000.
Through the mayor, it didn't show up in the spring amendment because it doesn't have a financial impact to the budget. We're just carrying that funding forward, and it's basically all captured in a single project. But any change in direction, which we will likely need, will come to council for a decision. I would expect it will be this spring. What staff are looking at the moment is potentially a capital project to facilitate affordable housing.
So to clarify on that, adding an additional capital project doesn't require identifying it in the budget?
Thank you. Through the chair, if it does become something that is part of the district's capital asset, then certainly. But if it's something where it's in partnership with another organization, then it is not. It would be all encompassed in the special operating project that we currently have. Don't have that information at this point in time, so there isn't an amendment to be proposed. But if there is something that comes forward, we will bring it forward. Otherwise, it can be in the 2026 to 2035 financial plan.
Thank you. Other questions, council? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks very much for bringing this forward, bringing the amendments forward. I would like to ask about the Brennan Park Rec Center upgrade. So this is the $1.2 million increase due from the expected expense, and that budget was through this IPD process, which I had high confidence in and high hopes in that this would be delivering the project for the dollar amount proposed. But this is a 5% increase in the budget being allocated for this project. What would be the consequences of not approving that $1.2 million increase at this time?
Through the mayor, thank you for the question. I'll provide some additional clarification that this is owner-held construction contingency. So it's not money added to the IPD contract at this time. It only gets added through contract amendments as deemed necessary. The risk associated with not approving it is that we slow down or delay construction, or we can't actually proceed with certain items that are required. Delays can often cause increases in cost over time. This is our opportunity at the spring amendment to try and have what I deem is an appropriate amount of contingency added to this project now to take this through to completion, which is currently scheduled for December 2025.
And to follow up, so what changed? Why do we now feel we need the increased owner-held contingency to the 15% standard, industry standard, where we were accepting the 6.5% before? What changed in this project that created this additional need that we could not have foreseen when we initially budgeted this project?
Through the mayor, thank you for the question. This is our first IPD project on a major retrofit. So this is the first time that staff is really experiencing this process and this type of contract on a retrofit of this size. And with a retrofit, as I'm sure you can understand, there's things that come up that maybe you're not anticipating. And certainly that is the case for Brennan Park. Elements are more surprising than expected, let's say. So I think based on our inexperience in this type of model, it's really become evident that we really do need to have the appropriate owner-held contingency at this time. And that's why we're here today.
Council, any other questions? I have a couple of my own. If I'll come back to Councillor Pettingill. So in table 3 of the report, which is the capital project amendments, there's an item here that is the steam room repairs. And I just wondered, is this in relation to the closure and the flooring, the slip issue? Is this some sort of other piece, and we'll see that expressed in another way? Or could just someone speak to what that is or isn't?
Thank you for the question through the mayor. That's correct. There was some work that was originally already planned to be done on the steam room. We have increased that budget request slightly to cover some additional scope that's come out of the review with VCH on the steam room.
Okay, so this should cover that from a financial perspective, and then timeline to be determined pending this approval. Do I have that order of operations correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. One of the pieces that I'm sort of challenged by with this is the Brennan Park Playground Splash Park construction and the timelines associated with that, and the field house. I know there's a lot of moving pieces on the site overall. Could someone speak to, I guess, overall the complexity there, or how we've arrived at this 2027 construction timeline? I know that it's been a bit of a moving target, and there's mention here of the field house and so on. Just how are these pieces moving together, and how are we ensuring that this is still advancing, I suppose?
Through the mayor, thank you very much for the question. Yes, it is complex, as you've alluded to. The Brennan Park retrofit, as it's been progressing through design, one of the major components in our reduction of greenhouse gas emissions for this project is removing the gas-fired HVAC units and replacing them with electrical. The result of that is using up more electrical capacity on that site overall. There was some work done at the outset of this project to look at what the ultimate scenario is for Brennan Park, for a new pool and a new ice rink. But then the project obviously is proceeding now, obviously in a smaller scale with new pool and rink to come. But what the result is of using up some of that electrical capacity is now we need to do an evaluation to see what space is available for both the splash park and field house. The acquisition of the field house is an additional project that effectively needs to require full coordination between the splash park and field house, because the field house is going to house the mechanical for the splash park. The next steps is really to formally tie these together contractually and hire consultants who will be looking at the splash park and the field house together, and in conjunction with the work that's being done on Brennan Park, what the electrical use is there, what's remaining on the electrical service, and then what the next steps are to really proceed. We'll have some decisions to make in future, whether or not, if we determine some additional electrical capacity is required at Brennan Park, whether we take an incremental step to facilitate the field house and splash park, or whether we need to take a bigger step to be prepared for the ultimate pool and rink. So all these projects are tied together, as you can imagine, on a site of this size. But they are proceeding with the hope of us looking at procuring additional consultants later this year for both the splash park and field house, and technical consultants to support that process.
Okay, thank you. And that's a good segue into my next question, which is, I know that when we do these spring amendments, it's mainly focusing on this, the current fiscal year, and the discussion of future years is often for things that get bumped from this year to a future, where for all various reasons. Is there anything here that is this signaling any delay in those future year projects that we have, and we have an identified funding source for and all the rest, but the pool and the rink are showing in our 5-year financial? Do we foresee those bumping out, or do those still feel like they're in the right spot?
Thank you for the question. Do you mind clarifying? Are you asking specifically about a delay to the ultimate pool and rink? Or?
Yeah, and I get this, like there was a lot of unknowns with that from a funding source perspective, but with this change in this year, is this foreshadowing the need to have those budget needs reflected in, like, be bumped as well, or do those feel like they're in the right spot pending funding source and or grant funding, whatever that looks like?
Thank you for the question. I think I'll speak more broadly to the fact that these projects are all in process, especially with the splash park and field house. We're in the process. Where they sat in the financial plan previously, I think, was quite ambitious, given we had this major retrofit that would have knock-on consequences to additional projects on this site. One of the tasks currently, as I said, bigger picture, is looking at those electrical needs. And why these two have been pushed to 2027 is that potential of a service upgrade and the length of time it takes to work through that design process with BC Hydro. But the steps we're taking now are laying the groundwork for those future larger projects. And it's still anticipated that we will be looking at those as we're doing this, so that we're not just looking at each of these projects in isolation, because I think that would be an inefficient way to move forward.
Okay, thank you. I know I was asking about things that are many years and lots of work away before we get there, but just wanted to get a foreshadow. I will go to Councillor Storr.
Thank you. Just on the splash park timing, appreciate that there's lots of moving pieces. I also think that this is one element that our community has been looking forward to for many years. And it was one of the big projects that we put in early, funded by community money contributions, so our community could start to see the real value of some of the development that was happening in town. And so I am curious, is there any way that we can advance it for construction in 2026? Or what would the lift be? What would we have to drop for that project to actually move forward?
Through the mayor, thank you for the question. We will be advancing the project this fall. As I mentioned, procuring more of the technical professionals to support us through this design process. As we get into that process, we will know more. We could say we're going to deliver it in 26, but realistically with the potential external factors with a hydro upgrade, that really wouldn't be realistic. We might find that maybe we don't need it and we can squeeze in. With what's available. There's a potential. I think no one is taking this off a priority list. This is a priority and it is moving, and that I can say. The timeline is really external factors that are very difficult for us to change, but it's internally, this is something that we're definitely progressing with. The timelines you're seeing are really based around the external factors.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, and my colleagues, thank you. You both got it. Some of what I was wanting to ask about the splash park and the move to 2027 in the current financial plan. I do note that as CAC funded, this is not something that proposes to change taxation, so maybe doesn't have the same time pressure as some of the other things from a, approving a budget sort of perspective. But I wonder, I guess I'm a bit uncomfortable at this point saying I'm fine with 2027, given all the other conversations. So how can we sort of have that conversation, or when do we have that about what would it take to do it in 2026? Or because the primary goal of the original discussion was to give community something very tangible to see the benefits of the CACs, the developer contributions. And so do we have a conversation of, hey, you know what, maybe this goes to 2028, but we need to still deliver that bigger goal of that tangible thing. And so is there something else that we can deliver? How do we sort of ensure that if we are approving this, we're not just sort of saying 2027 is fine, end of discussion, we're not worrying about this anymore? Like, is there something we can do to say, hey, we're okay sort of notionally with what's in this financial plan, but we still want to have a discussion about this piece well before we're into 2026 too far?
Thank you for the question. Oh.
Now I'm going to go to Ms. Glendale.
Thank you. Through the mayor, this conversation is getting more into strategy and prioritization versus actual budget amendment, and appreciate the concern from council and wanting to have that discussion. I would say that would have to be referred to a different meeting. And then staff could do more research, provide a more fulsome answer. Given the timeline of the legislative requirement to get this bylaw done, I wouldn't recommend delaying this amendment. However, referring that conversation around what community amenity you want to see in 2026, if it's possible, it's all very conditional, would be a different conversation at a different meeting.
Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
And generally, I'm fine with that. And I'm just sort of wanting to be clear on that process and just sort of making sure, looking for that assurance that an approval of this, despite the 2027 date in the financial plan, where we could still move things around in terms of the splash park subsequent to another meeting, if that's what council so desired.
I'm going to take a stab at this, and I'll go to you if I missed anything or if I made it worse instead of better. I think this really, to me, is about what's happening. This meeting here is about what's going to happen this year. And then going into next year's budget would be the time where we direct that. So the gap between this discussion and next year's budget, we need to fill with making sure that we understand those priorities. And I don't think there's a risk in, we've heard that this particular project may, the timeline is sort of, the project itself is setting that. There's not a lot we can do to adjust that. So I do think that this is part of maybe a facilities update, or we need to maybe create opportunity explicitly for this so that it feeds into the next full budget cycle. So that's where my head is on this, and I agree with and I agree that there needs to be another place for that conversation. But this is about the realities we find ourselves in for the remainder of the year, which is advancing this work still. So if we're okay with that, not with those steps, we'll figure out what that looks like between here and fitting into the next budget cycle, which is where we set these priorities. Does that make sense? And I'm going to go to Ms. Glendale to make sure that was there anything you wanted to add to that?
Just for clarity, more for the community that's listening in, is that what staff are saying is based on external factors, the likelihood of delivering the splash park in advance of 2027 is extremely low. It remains the high priority that council directed. It's just that these unforeseen challenges with the electrical system have pushed it out. What I did hear around a question was, is there another community money, something that can be delivered in 2026? Again, we're bumping into tight timelines. I don't have that answer. I don't believe staff has that answer, but that could be discussed at a future meeting.
Okay, I'm happy to just sort of flag that because it does this sort of line up. The move is sort of gets us into work planning things and which I'm not trying to get into that here now, but I want to flag is I think this is a discussion point sooner rather than later.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks very much. So on the splash park and field house replacement, I'm in alignment with postponing the expenditure, not jumping into the project without fully understanding the impact of external factors that will have on our budget. And I may want to step in the opposite direction of my council colleagues, which is ask the question, should we be putting a larger pause on this until we can clearly understand the actual budget impact and estimate effectively what the cost is going to be? I fear that this 1.6 million that we have allocated here, we're going to be back here in a year, and next council is going to be back here in 2027. If we dive into this project, we're just going to see escalations. Is there a way that we can effectively do something now to get a clearer idea on, like, should we remove this from even the 2027 budget and only put it back in when we have a clear idea of how much it's going to cost?
I think that
let me try to reframe that. That's not a question staff can answer. It's a
Yeah.
good question. Can I try to reframe?
You can try. Yep.
What are the budgetary consequences of removing that 1.6 million and the 977,000 from the 2027 budget and instead putting in a budget for planning those expenditures?
Thank you, through the mayor. We already have the budget. That's what we've signaled, is that we have the budget for design and planning. And we mentioned this is a priority, and that's what we want to really continue with so that we can get a better understanding of actually the scope, because that's still what we don't understand. And that will happen. Ms. Boxford can maybe answer around what happens if we remove the future budget.
Thank you, through the chair. This gets into a bit of a balance between financial planning and having perfect estimations. If we don't put things in the financial plan on a longer term view, then we have a challenge of raising funds and looking at our reserve balances, because there's a number of projects on the go. So we're always in a bit of a balance here. This is indicative because it's a few years out. And certainly as we get closer to the time, better design, better planning, we'll refine the what's in the financial plan. But that's the impact if we do remove it completely.
Thank you for that. And really, this expenditure now is developing that and the planning for and thus solidifying the numbers. I'm seeing nods at the table. Back to this capital project amendments table. So this is table 3. At the bottom, it has Brennan Park Recreation Center upgrades, which is the 1.2 million. Then further up, not the next one, or skip one, it has a Brennan Park Recreation Center upgrade. It's the same different funding source. It's capital reserve for 385. And there's a bunch of Brendan Park items here, but they all have more specific labeling. Can you speak about what that one is?
Through the mayor, thank you for the question. Yes, that 385,000 is the grouping of the other projects, which I referenced to in the back, that were included in the scope. They weren't all in 2025, that we needed to bring them back into 2025 to basically add them to the larger scope.
Okay, thank you for that. And then in the, I'm curious about just the maintenance needs of the beach groomer being removed. And just, do we not need to groom the beach? I'm just curious if we're what level we're maintaining this to, or what learnings we have here as to the needs.
Through the mayor, thank you for your question. Yeah, so the beach groomer was originally put in the budget before we understood exactly how that downtown beach was going to operate. The intention of that was to have it as like a combed beach, like what you would see in Penticton or something like that. And that was what was envisioned at the time. In reality, we get a lot of driftwood and large pieces of debris. And so the equipment needs that we have for downtown have changed. So we're not going to be manicuring the beach in the way that maybe was envisioned when the planning was first put in place. Now that we've seen the beach in operation and we've seen the park in operation, and we've been able to observe the contractor or the developer maintaining it, we've realized that the type of maintenance we're going to be doing is different. So we don't need that piece of equipment anymore. And we've shifted, based on this amendment, we've shifted to the type of equipment that we're actually going to utilize to maintain the downtown parks.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Penningham.
Yeah, just on related equipment, I saw the removal of one of, as I understand, two bike lane sweepers. But I also note that, we've approved a fairly aggressive transportation master plan with a significant mode shift ambitions. And feels a bit strange to try and decide how many bike lane sweepers we need as a council. We haven't really had the discussion of what level of active transit trail clearing do we expect. And so it's not clear to me that, and I understand we had a mechanical failure as well, that what's proposed here meets that need, which we haven't really agreed to. So when or how do we have that sort of discussion of, given the mode shift we aspire to, what level of active transit or active transportation route trail management, like what's our expectation for level of service there? When do we have that, which seems to me necessary to figure out how many lane sweepers we actually need?
Through the chair, I don't think I can answer the question about when we have that discussion, but I can maybe provide some clarity because it is confusing what we're proposing. Some clarity on the equipment that we currently have and why we need to amend the budget. So we currently have two, let's call them trails machines, which we refer to as the MV. They're those red machines that you see driving around in the winter with a salter and a plow, or in the summer, they'll have a little mower on the side. We utilize those to maintain both some of our sidewalks and our trails. So corridor trail, discovery trail, anywhere that's paved especially. Two of those machines, we've had those for a few years now. One of them catastrophically failed. The engine blew up essentially. And so we are asking to replace that sooner. It was scheduled for replacement in 2028, I believe, or 2027. We need to move that up because it's not functional at the moment. So we're down to one single unit. So that is what that amendment is for, is just to bring the purchase of it to this year. We need that in order to be able to maintain our current level of service that we've been maintaining up to now. The other two items. What we're actually doing, we have two line items in the budget or in the financial plan to purchase additional, what we're calling sidewalk sweepers or trails machines. The intent for these machines are to be slightly smaller, or for this machine is to be slightly smaller, more for sidewalks, and for in the summer, clearing debris like deadfall and whatnot, leaves and sticks and everything off of our various active transportation paths. There's two entries in the financial plan, but we're only actually resourced for one at the moment in terms of staffing and in terms of level of service. So the expectation is we actually only need one to maintain current level of service with the new, with the expansion of our active transportation network to date and in the near future. So looking forward, yes, there might be a need to increase, and it will be a discussion, I guess, amongst staff and council as to what the level of service expectations are. But for this amendment, specifically what we're doing is we're removing one of the items because there's two in the financial plan right now. We're going to remove one, but increase the budget on the other one to be able to actually get the machine that we need.
Do you have a follow-up to that?
Well, no, that's helpful, and it sounds like we will have that level of service discussion at some point. And so, I'm sort of comfortable with where we are now, and maybe just another thing to flag of a discussion given our other plans. Just switching gears, and this is just a clarification, and I was trying to move away from the splash park, but some of the line items still say Brendan Park Playground and Splash Park construction. Is that just a legacy title? And because I think we've sort of decided to focus just on the Splash Park. So can I confirm that that's just a legacy title?
Yes, through the mayor, that is correct. And it's being amended for next year's financial plan.
Thank you. Council, other questions? Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, one more. I want to celebrate that we got partial funding for the circular economy feasibility work, which is great. It's also always a flag when we only receive partial funding for something that we had a larger scope envisioned for. So I just want to check in and make sure that we have a solid plan for delivering on a partial version of that work, and that is still going to achieve the outcomes that we had desired, or if it's better just to walk away.
Thank you for the question through the mayor. Yes, we had partial funding. It's mostly for all of the projects go ahead except for one phase of the circular procurement program. And so it's still a large majority of what we had wanted to do. The third phase that wasn't funded for is on continuing the Trailblazer program that we're doing as a phase 2 of that. So we're very grateful that we got to do the phase 1 through 2024, and it was to build on that. So all of the project scope that we are able to do through this funding is all new scope and ones that we have been trying to get on. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council, we've got a recommendation here before us, and we need to move on with our day as well. So we've had, are you moving the staff recommendation? Is there a seconder? Councillor Stoner seconds. We speak to it, Councillor French.
Yes, please. Thank you, Mayor. So I'm pleased that district staff have found ways to keep the taxation impact from this move to a minimum. Property owners are being asked over the next few years to pay more than maybe they're used to in the past because previous councils haven't collected, in my opinion, tax amounts with future needs in mind. We're making that up now and over the next couple of years. So this is an amendment that I support primarily because the money needed to get us through, much of the money, this budget ahead of us is coming from community amenity contributions, capital reserves, from grants, development cost charges, and from equipment reserve funds. So I appreciate what I perceive as staff going out of its way to try and keep as much of this out of the taxation category. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Stoner as a seconder, and I'll go to Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Through the chair, I will be supporting the motion on the floor, and thanks to staff for doing our spring amendment check-in. I think this is always an important time just to make sure that our numbers are in check for the 2025 budget before we set the tax rate bylaw. And we can account for things like grant decisions that have been made in the interim and or staff capacity components, especially after the Q4 update from last year. There are a few pieces in here that I think are frustrating, and my questions may have alluded to that, things that I would like to see move faster, but appreciate that there are external factors that we can't always keep in our pocket. And so also being honest with our community about where we're at in terms of timing for some of these big projects that they have anticipated, like the splash park, is important. Last time at the Valley Cliff Childcare Facility did come to us for a request of increased funding. I was also really hesitant to support that. And we are here again with an additional request for another $146,000. This is not to underestimate the importance of that project. 36 new childcare spaces are in dire need in this community, and where we are at with that project means that we're at about $100,000 per childcare space. Part of that is funded by provincial funding, and then a portion of it is provided by community amenity contributions. So at least it is the development that is paying for the municipal portion of that. New development in our community. But it is also making me really kind of pause and think about how we actually embark on some of these big construction projects. And we know that we have a few under our belt now, 2 fire halls, public works facility, the Brennan Park retrofit. We've tried a few different things. And so I do think that going forward, doing a little bit of a pause, a reconsideration of what we have learned to date, what has worked, what hasn't, and how we can better set ourselves up for success for the next list of big projects will be really valuable, both for council, staff, as well as our community. But for the spring amendment, I'm happy to support as is. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks very much. I have an amendment that I'd like to try. Councillor Stoner's comments about how we can learn and move forward with capital projects, major capital projects, expanding, leads to this amendment that I'd like to suggest, that we change the Brennan Park Recreation Center upgrade funding from, and just to be clear, that's the item number 845-00110, from $1,225,697 to $81,771. And I'll speak to how I got that 81,000 if it's seconded.
Is there a seconder for the motion?
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. The difference from the 2.2 million to the 81,000 is the removal of the increased contingency. 1.2, apologies. Is the removal of the $1,143,924 in contingency increase. Since this is something that's an owner-held contingency increase, I absolutely recognize how this allows the project to move forward with less potential hiccups. It also increases the risk of the project actually using that contingency. So if we want to keep our projects on task, on budget, I think we as a council have a responsibility to really look carefully when we do have budget increases and to make sure that those increases are absolutely outside of expectation, outside of the possible ways that we could have known it increasing. So effectively trying to help us do better by saying no when an increase does come to the table. Thanks.
Comments on the amendment, Councillor Stoner?
Thank you. Through the chair, I appreciate my colleague's suggestion, and I think I see where he's trying to go with it, although I won't be supporting the motion on the floor. I heard from staff, and I think in previous projects, 15% contingency is fairly normal in these sorts of projects. And right now we have 6.5% in the project held risk registry. Let me see if I can get all of my words correct here. And so we're asking for staff are asking for 8.5% for owner-held contingency to be used to help float aspects of the project. The reality is a project of this scale, I think, does require a bit of that slush fund, and I do trust staff sufficiently to make sure that that is used as minimally as possible. But where elements are needed in order just to keep the project moving, I don't want staff to have to come back to council and find time on our agendas to do so, because we know that delays cost money as well. And so I'm happy to support the motion as not the amendment, but the proposal that staff have brought forward, while also recognizing my previous comments that I think that there's lessons that we can learn for future projects here. But I don't think that putting this particular project in jeopardy, where we have over $12 million of grant funding from other orders of government, is worthwhile at this time. I think we have a project that hopefully can get near completion or at completion on its current timeline for the end of 2025. And I think having the owner-held contingency will help support that.
Thank you. Councillor French?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Herford. The fiscal conservative inside of me desperately wants to support the amendment. But then I hear from the many friends that I have who are desperately pushing us to get Brennan Park improved, get Brennan Park expanded. And I just think that to take this step puts that Brennan Park bigger project in too great of a risk category. And how I think we should approach this is to carry on with the plan staff has put in front of us, and the route that we're currently on for improvements at Brennan Park. And when this phase of the project is done, we do a solid debrief on it and ask ourselves some really tough questions and really explore how our process functioned, how it is that we got to the point where we need to look at these increases, and just figure out, as we move the Brennan Park projects forward, how to do it better.
Thank you for that. Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's too late to ask for some clarity, but my understanding is, given the nature of the contract, were we to support this amendment so there's no additional contingency left, we find a place where some contingency is required. At that point, council has to have some meetings and either approve it or deny it. But if we deny it, and by doing so sort of, like, my understanding is we can't shrink the scope because of the grants, and we have commitment to the proponents, so we can't cancel the project and just sort of walk away and save the money. We're still on the hook for significant amounts of money. So is that correct? Or is there a way, could we draw a hard line in the sand, like we're at our limit and do it for this or don't do it? That's in my understanding that that's actually not an option given the nature of the current contracts we're in here.
There's a motion on the floor, so I know that there's a line there between points of clarity from staff and weighing into that. So I don't know that I'm not seeing any hands coming up that are willing to wade into it with the way that it's been asked, but.
Okay, I'll frame it, since we're in a motion, I will reframe it as a comment, which is the opposite way we normally do it. But that is my understanding. And because of that understanding that I have, I would find it challenging in this case to support the motion. I understand what we're trying to get at, but I think in this particular scenario, what's proposed actually introduces greater financial risk. I think there are some lessons to be learned here in how we approach some of these things, but I'm not sure that at this point, this takes us in a better direction.
Thank you. I won't be supporting the amendment. I think that the ask here is reasonable and ensures that this project can move and move forward in a timely fashion, and thus protects us from cost escalation through delay. And I also wanted to say that these funds in an owner-held contingency are for very specific things that have a very specific process to access those funds. So this isn't just allowing the project to run up to that. It's there should these things come to light. I also think that the number here gets us to that overall 15% contingency of what's left of the project, but on the overall project still represents a lower number than that 15%. So I'm comfortable with this, and I feel that this is likely where these numbers should have been or could have been justified anyways from the onset. So I'm happy with where we are, and I'm looking forward to being into the community to be into the renovated building again soon. And I'm looking forward to also the total of this contingency not being used and returning to the funding source, which is our community amenity contribution fund. So with that, I'll call the question on the amendment. In favor, Councillor Hamilton in favor, and opposed, Councillor French, Pettingill, Stoner, and Mayor Herford oppose. The amendment fails. We're back to the original motion now. Has anyone not spoken to the original motion? Do you want to, or is it to me, Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, I will support this, and I know some of my discussion in particular focused on timelines, which we're really trying to understand this for the purpose of the 2025 taxation rates, but this is a financial plan. It does set out sort of timing of various projects, so that's why that's come up. I think there are some things for us to still hash through. What is here makes sense in the broader context of everything that's going on. I do appreciate the efforts to make sure that these changes actually don't impact taxation. But I think there are some things that we've spoken about where we can improve processes. And yeah, in terms of moving these things forward as best we can at this point, I think for now this does make the most sense.
Thank you very much. Do you want to speak to the main motion? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I'll speak in support of the main motion. Speaking to our process, I think that our budget process seems to work quite well. Planning and effectively deciding on our budget in December, and then having the spring amendment with changes, accepting the fact that changes happen early in the year. I'm quite impressed with how our budget process works in this respect. And while it's absolutely, I personally get frustrated, and certainly folks in the community do too, I imagine, when we see escalations in cost. I do recognize that sometimes we can't plan for everything. My efforts here are trying to prompt us, trying to help us find ways to be, and I don't mean more accurate as in to the dollar, I mean to be able to forecast our budgeting more effectively. So yes, I agree with the amendments. Thank you very much to staff for putting this together. And I really look forward to seeing these projects come to completion. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm speaking in support of the motion. I think when I reflect on the sort of the totality of this report, it gives me a lot of confidence in our processes and our team. I see areas where, we've, say in the downtown parking implementation, to use an example, where council has chosen a specific direction. This gives us an ability to reflect that in our budget. A version of as immediate as anything happens in this space, and when a new asset comes online, like the park, and we are adjusting to learning what those needs are going to be and adjusting. I see this being very responsive there. Now there are these areas where the news is that goes both ways, where there's challenges and they're surfaced, and we have to grapple with those decisions. And the reality of the Brennan Park Rec Center upgrades is, during a renovation on an operational building, it's incredibly challenging. And I've been impressed with everyone involved in keeping the building as operational as possible throughout the process. And And I know that there's we're learning more intimately all the nooks and crannies of that building as it comes apart as part of this renovation. So I do think that contingency is important and appropriate to have there. Although I do hope that the vast majority of that comes back through CAC to its funding source, as I said earlier. But I'm comfortable that may not be the case. I think the on the childcare facility piece, I think about all the ways, all the roles that we can play in creating childcare spaces. This one has become my least favorite, where ensuring a childcare space is created and covenanted through the development process has far less financial risk than participating as actively as we have in this particular project. And that will just be a lesson that I'm going to carry with me as we move forward and work on things in this work on future projects for childcare. But I'm excited that this should get it over the line, and folks that need childcare will have it. But the process to get there and the cost per spot overall and directly from our funds is challenging. But given where we are, I do think that the additional funds included in this amendment are appropriate. But I'm going to need to be sold pretty hard on taking on a project of this nature in the future. Seeing no other hands, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And thanks for everyone else that came out to support us in the conversation today. Much appreciated. Maybe we'll just take a quick 5 minutes just to let folks cycle out of the room, and then we'll reconvene. So we'll reconvene at 2:30. Okay, we're back. Now we're under 4A2, the District of Squamish 2025 Property Tax Rates Bylaw, number 3151, 2025. Now I'll turn over to staff to run us through the presentation.
Good afternoon again, Mayor and Council. My name is Laura Turner, Director of Financial Planning and Reporting, and I'm joined by Heather Boxford, General Manager of Finance, Procurement, and IT. We're here with you today to bring forward 3 readings of the 2025 tax rate bylaw. And please note, a full tax policy will be brought to Council for review and approval later this year. BC Assessment completed property assessments for the 2025 tax year and provided to the district on March 27th as part of their revised rule. Presented here is the year-over-year change in assessment by class. Of particular note is the tax assessed non-market change increase of 1.25%, mainly due to increased assessed NMC for Class 4 major industry. It's important to note that the 1.31% total change over 2024 represents the increase in property assessed values, not taxation revenue, as revenue is calculated as assessment times the approved property tax rate. There are 2 key steps to setting the tax rates for 2025 after receiving the property assessments. First, determine the annual tax revenue requirement, which is approved in the 2025 to 2029 financial plan bylaw. And second, set the tax revenue distribution between property classes and calculate tax rates for each class. At the February 18th special business meeting, staff presented the tax rate establishment process in detail and were directed to utilize the revenue distribution method rather than the fixed ratio method used in previous years. This method ensures that tax revenue distribution of the classes is consistent to prior year and the revenue from NMC impacts the class that it is assessed in. Summarized here are the proposed 2025 tax rates and the resulting municipal tax revenue by property class. The total tax revenue requirement for 2025 is $49.7 million, which is calculated as taxation revenue of $48.2 million in the financial plan adopted December 17th, plus the adjustments of $1.5 million in the spring amendment. Revenue from NMC totals $1.8 million, an increase of 4.17%, of which $1.5 million is from WLNG, or 3.4%. As noted at the bottom of the slide, excluding WLNG, the total tax revenue requirement is $48.2 million with $315,000 from NMC, which is a 0.73% increase. Illustrated on this slide are the tax impacts to the average residential, business, and light industry folios based on the proposed 2025 tax rates. The municipal tax requirement for the average residential property is approximately $2,974, which is a $362 or 13.9% increase over 2024. It's important to note that average assessment is calculated by taking the total property class assessment divided by the number of properties within the class, or the folio count. The purpose is to just illustrate an example of the increase in property tax an owner may experience within each class. However, individual tax is based on individual property assessed value. And that concludes our short presentation. I will turn it back over to Mayor and Council for discussion.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Council, questions on what we've heard or what's in the report? Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to see the new property tax calculation method come through. I'm geeking out, I don't know. One piece that catches my eye, and it could be, I suspect it's an artifact of how we report numbers, is the average light, the change in the average light industry is 28%, while average residential and business is around 13%. The revenue distribution model attempts, its main goal is to keep the increase per class on the base the same. Did the increase per class of the base before non-market change, was it constant between residential, business, and light industry? And yeah, maybe I'll leave it there. Was that constant? I just don't see those numbers here for good reason, I don't expect.
Through the mayor. I'll start with explaining the 13.9 and the 28%. So those percentages, they're slightly different than the revenue distribution because those are the average just on the number of folios, so it'll never completely tie back. But we did use the ending distribution from last year on the base of this year before an MC for the calculation. So that's where the distribution's a bit different.
Do you happen to recall, it's not urgent, what that increase on the base was? And that would be the average, that would be the increase on the base for each sector.
Just a point of clarity, are you asking for the tax burden ratio? So what we included as the base distribution, or are you asking for the revenue increase by class?
What was the percentage increase to the base from 2024 to 2025? So that's before non-market change, and it should be one number that's the same for every class.
Sorry, through the chair, we don't actually have that number in front of us, but we could potentially grab it at some point. Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. And thanks for your work on this. I'm grateful to hear that at least one of my colleagues is excited about tax rate ratios and bylaws. It is a big piece of the work that we do. I think one of the things that jumps out at me is I appreciate that the average municipal tax impact is just that, an average, and it also accounts for the average assessment change. So not just our own numbers. But I do think we are seeing a lower non-market change than expected. And that was one thing that we flagged in our financial planning process, is that in our 5-year financial plan, we're estimating a 3% non-market change year over year. I'm just wondering if we can, or if we're considering revisiting that non-market change going forward, given that we know that just generally things are slowing down. And the implications thereof are like quite substantive. So where we were estimating 9.6, we're now at an average of 13.9 when we consider assessment. And so I just am curious how we might be considering addressing that non-market change going forward.
Thank you for the question through the chair. Yeah, absolutely. NMC is an estimate based on historical, and that's what we've used as a placeholder, and being very clear that is just merely more folios. That does not change the tax revenue requirement. So the highlight is that, this is 12.6, and, should we get the additional NMC, that is great. It's more folios to pay for it, but it is just an estimate. This average will bring it down. So we can certainly do that. We, have put in the 5-year plan that goes down to 2%. We'll take another look at the average year over year. But there is fluctuations. It could be timing of when buildings come online. So it really could go up and down. And we've seen everything from, north of 5 down to below 2. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. And then also this kind of bleeds into the earlier conversation, but the decision was made to allocate the non-market change from wood fiber within that class, and that the revenue thereof is going back into provision to pay for something that we had pulled out of provision previously. I just wonder when we have a conversation about how we are going to manage WNG tax going forward. and principles around that.
Thank you for the question through the mayor. Yeah, certainly we had the discussion, preliminary discussion at the February 18th meeting, just to have the discussion around the not having WLNG pay for operations because it creates a dependency on the operations, and that can be problematic should an industry ever not exist. And now the community is there to hold that base. We will certainly, at the end of the couple of years that is to be funding back the provision, we will absolutely bring that back, and council can make the decision on where that should go. The recommendation would likely still stand as being a reserve contribution for future projects.
Thank you. Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just wondering if we can put back up the slide that had a bit more detail on the non-market change, because as my colleague said, it was a bit lower than our projections had been, although we sort of understood the challenges with some of those projections. And then while just for the public, they may have seen us and we've spoken about, as they've come through over the past few weeks, approvals and what percentage of our housing commitment we are hitting with different approvals. But for clarity, while a number of approvals have been flowing through, what we're actually seeing on the ground is things not being completed or not being completed to occupancy, which is why the non-market change number is down. And really, when people have sort of felt a lot of development that's actually happened prior to 2024, and in 2024, we saw a significant slowdown in completion of new development. Is that an accurate summary of how to understand that non-market change number?
Thank you for the question. I think that would be an accurate summary. There's definitely timing implications. Construction being built in front of us doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be on the roll. There's a number of steps in there and number of steps of valuation before they become part of the NMC. So generally speaking, it is an accurate summary.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so just looking at these numbers, like we see 13.9 in a few places in our report in terms of the, I guess, the overall change in, oh, that's residential. So in terms of overall requirement, change in tax requirement total, that's 11.77. Is that where we land after we consider non-market change and everything else? That's where we're landing?
Through the mayor. So that bottom line that you're referring to, that's excluding WLNG. So the total revenue requirement is the 12.51%, the 48.2 million. And so of that, 315,000 would be generated from non-market change, and then the 47.9 would be from existing taxpayers or from the base. And then including the WLNG, the total revenue requirement that we're collecting on would be the 49.6. And then as well, 1.8 would be coming from non-market change, and then the 47.9 from the base.
Okay, I'm going to stew on that a little bit. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to, yeah, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thanks very much. I wasn't doing a very good job of communicating. It's the 11.77. That's the number I was looking for. Thank you very much, because that's the number that all of the base got increased before non-market change, correct? Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, Council, any other questions of clarity? We do have a recommendation here if feel like we're getting close to that. Go ahead.
This is a little bit of a side tangent, hopefully not too far. You mentioned the tax policy coming to us in future. I'd just like to check, do you envision that tax policy that we write being sufficiently detailed for somebody to reproduce the procedure? For example, I understand it's difficult, but when we say, we calculate it using this thing and this thing, it's hard for somebody to reproduce and really see what happened. Is your vision, is staff's vision to have that tax policy written in such a way that somebody could reproduce the calculation should they be interested in doing it?
a bit, I just want to recognize this is sort of foreshadowing into a future conversation, but if you would like to comment on it now, otherwise, I'd maybe welcome an update as to the approximate time when we will have that conversation. So I'll put both those things. I'll go over to you.
Thank you for the question through the chair. So typically policy doesn't get into procedurals, so it doesn't get into the nuts and bolts necessarily. The procedure or the policies that we've seen have been very much like this is the distribution, taking from the base, the fundamentals of how the taxation is calculated, but not the actual nuts and bolts, not the procedural, not giving the mathematical formulas by any means. So I think if somebody wanted to learn that, could possibly get some insight from it, but generally speaking, policies are a lot higher level.
Okay, and then the second part, when should we expect to see that back so we can grapple with those concepts?
Thank you for the question, through the chair. Staff have indicated Q4, so just by the end of 2025.
Okay, that'll position us well for this conversation next year. Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
Just, and I hope this isn't too much of a tangent, but I'm wondering when our next annual report is coming. And why I'm asking is I see the last one was in June. And for me, that provides really helpful context to this sort of discussion and, you know, the discussion of what are we getting for what we're paying. And I think the annual report provides a really clear explanation of that. So I'm just sort of wondering when we might expect to see that.
So those, that annual report, I'm glad to hear that you enjoy it. I do find them very interesting, and I use them when I'm talking to someone that moves to a new community. I seek out their annual report, but it is a legislative requirement, so the timing would be about the same. Is that any other context for that? No. Okay. So we should see that around the same time. I think, are you moving? I'll second it. Would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, I will speak to this and thank staff for the work again. This is hopefully the ribbon on top of the bow of many, many months of financial planning and will get us across the line for this year and just in time to start the next round. I do think the tax rates as presented are fair and equitable and achieve a lot of the goals that we have in our financial plan policy. I really do appreciate staff including the graph on the municipal tax per average household to our comparable communities. That was really helpful. So to our community of Squamish, if you don't have that report in front of you, Squamish is definitely lower than all of our comparable communities along the corridor from North Van up to Whistler, and slightly more elevated than perhaps our population size comparable communities in the interior. But I think that's very reasonable given the cost of living, the reality of delivering projects where we live. We just know it's more expensive in Squamish than somewhere like Courtenay or Cranbrook. And so that was really helpful for me to kind of get a sense of where our average residential tax base is comparable to other communities. And I do also want to appreciate and thank my council colleague for pushing us on better understanding how we set our tax rates and using a new approach this year. Well, I do think it is perhaps not noticeable to the end user in this day and age or in this particular bylaw. I do think overall it sets better principles in terms of allocating non-market change to specific classes, and I'm happy to see that going forward. But otherwise, thanks for all the work on this, and I'll be supporting the motion on the floor.
Thank you. Councillor French.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Herford. So for me, these tax rates are acceptable. As I've seen over my last 6 years on council and then through my years reporting on municipal affairs dating back to 1990, there is definitely value and consistency and certainty around these rates. And where we've landed is appropriate for our current situation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks again for the doing this in a new way, in a way that I think that keeps in the slide that's on the screen right now, that revenue requirement change. That means that there's actually an 11.77% increase in every sector before non-market growth. And then anything beyond, anything different from that 11.77%, that's due to growth within a sector, non-market change within a sector. So thanks very much for putting together this new tax collection, to this tax mill rate definition method. Thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Prendergast.
Yeah, thanks. We'll also be supporting this. For me, there are still some questions about understanding the tax policy piece that we've adopted. My understanding is it wouldn't have had a significant change to the numbers this year. So it didn't get into that discussion today, but I look forward to that next discussion. The sort of relativism in tax rates is interesting because, as my colleagues have said, compared to other communities around, we're lower. When you look at the increase year over year this year compared to prior years, it's higher than it has been, higher than we're used to. When you look at other provinces and so on, I think we're a fair bit lower. And so it really, in some ways, depends on what you look at. The other thing, and it's why I mentioned the annual report, when you start to dig into what are we actually delivering, and I know some of my colleagues have said our community has asked for a lot, and we have really focused on doing what we can to deliver that. Childcare, affordable housing. We've seen our transportation master plan. We have a pending significant costs in terms of transportation costs given our community growth, and so we are doing some investment now to minimize that. We are, and I think it bears repeating, a significant portion of this budget, sort of the total amount, I guess, increase is for asset management, where right now with Brennan Park, we are not only doing catch up and replacing infrastructure, but the community hadn't put aside that money. So we are trying to correct that and make sure that future council, future community already has the money when they need to replace their Brennan Park. And so we're doing that double work. So we are really working hard as a council, as a community, and I appreciate staff sort of helping us through this to do all the things that the community wants and do catch up for money not saved in the past. This is a huge burden we've placed on ourselves to make our community much better in the future. And we will see if, people, I think so far have been supportive of that. But that next annual report in particular, I think is going to be really important for people to understand concretely what we are delivering, because I think we are delivering a lot, and that helps make this number make sense. One other thing. There's another really good table in here of our taxation, our dependence on investment income, developer contributions, and so on compared to other communities. And I think we actually fare quite well in bringing in external revenue, not from taxation. And so that's another comparable of how you sort of understand where these rates are. And I think all things considered, we are doing a good job. No one likes things getting more expensive, but I think we've made some hard but good choices here. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking in support of the motion, this step is the last step in our budgeting process, say for adoption. I think, reflecting on the overall process and our engagement with the community specifically on budget, and you've all likely heard me say that every conversation is a budget conversation. So engaging with the community overall, I hear often about the pieces that we're not doing, and I think this will be interesting as this rolls out to the community and people that we haven't been able to reach. We will be reaching with a tax bill. I do think that we've got a well-reasoned budget overall and distribution of that load as well. The non-market change number is lower than projected, and as we talked about a little bit throughout the questions here, has a lot of variability to it. I don't think the community necessarily feels that construction has backed off that far, but it is a timing thing around occupancy and when they're assessed. But I think it's important that we in the past, we've been closer to projected, and I've felt comfortable using that smaller number that we're projecting rather than the large number and speaking about it with we're projecting the non-market change. So this will be a change I take going forward, which is the communicating the big number, and with the caveat that non-market change will come in and have an impact. But it's often in these seats quite tempting to use that smaller number, and I've done that myself. So I also found the comparables very helpful. And just to contextualize where we are, I often have conversations and get messages and emails from people as they travel around the province. They look at something else in another community and what it takes to have that thing. And sometimes it's this is a higher taxation. Other times it's there's a unique piece, but this is a great piece of context. And just, I know we try to keep the federal stuff out of the room, but I've been hearing a lot of discussion at the federal level about waiving developer fees and these types of things. And when that's said, that means putting it on your municipal tax bill. And I just want to highlight that, because here we do have a strong DCC program that we're continuing to refine, and that is that concept that development pays, or growth pays for growth, and if we move from that, then this will be transferred on to future tax bills, whether that's mandated to us by the federal government or not, but something to consider if you haven't voted already. I will go to Councillor Stoner before I call a question.
I would be remiss to not use this as a plug to let anybody who's watching know that we also have the Community Citizen Satisfaction Survey has launched, which is a great time to provide your input and feedback on the services that you're receiving from the district, the taxation levels, and all kinds of other questions that are deeply important to those of us who are trying to provide fulsome services. So if you are watching, take the survey and tell your friends.
Thank you very much. Okay, without getting stuck into a citizen satisfaction survey discussion, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. So Council, we are running slightly behind, but we're going to take a break and we'll be back. We'll take a 10-minute break instead of the 15, try to claw back 5 minutes to try to pull us back on time, but we do have some guests joining us. So we'll be back at 10 after. Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are now on to item 5A1, which is the transit maintenance facility update. And I will turn it over to staff to introduce our guests and get us started.
All right, we're live. We're up. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. We are. Oh, yeah. I'm just gonna be able to drive. You're gonna drive for me. Okay. Awesome. Oh, perfect. My name is Rob Ringnut. I'm the Government Relations Manager for BC Transit for the South Coast region. I'm joined here today by Errol Nordstrom, who's our Project Manager for Facility Projects, and Tim Nordum, who's also Project Manager responsible for infrastructure. So we're here today really to talk about transit facility and an update on progress at this point. You may remember in July of 2022, going back a little ways, this council did approve entering into an MOU with BC Transit to proceed with pre-implementation work for exploring a proposed transit facility. In late 2024, I would have sent a letter to council notifying you that we had acquired a piece of property that we felt was suitable for the facility. So that's kind of where we got to today. And then today we want to obviously present an update on progress that's been made to that effect. So yeah, so today provide an update on information plan activities. We're going to go through some context. We'll talk a little bit about BC Transit's project development process, a little bit about the existing fleet or existing facility, and maybe some of the challenges that we see with those facilities as we move forward on what I would say a robust transit expansion plan. Talk a little bit about the property that we've acquired, and then what the next steps are for council. So before we kind of move forward, I just wanted to kind of quickly look back how we kind of got here. And when you really look at a lot of the work that Squamish, the District of Squamish and BC Transit have embarked on, looking at your official community plan, looking at your climate action plan, and then obviously the work that we've done together through our Transit Future Action Plan, there's a common theme through all those plans that really outlines the importance of transit, not only for relieving congestion issues, mobility of people, and obviously helping on the economic side of things, and then also on the environmental benefits and GHG reductions. So, really moving forward to this facility is really a step forward for us to help achieve a lot of the goals that we've seen outlined in a lot of these similar plans when it comes to transit. So I'll turn it over to Errol, and he'll talk a little bit about the facility planning.
I think that's just the last item noted on the last slide, identified our low carbon fleet program, and I just wanted to touch on that. The implementation of the low carbon fleet requires investments in charging infrastructure. Those investments, obviously, it makes a lot of sense to connect those investments on property that is owned, as opposed to the risk of not maybe having access to those lands. So BC Transit has committed to transitioning from diesel buses to electric buses by 2040. And so this facility in Squamish would support that transition, that ability to construct charging infrastructure in support of this strategy. In terms of just kind of a review of the project planning process and development process, the early stages would be represented in a transit future plan. The transit future plan would speak in very high level terms about what investments are required to be able to progress and continue transit service expansion over the long term. And once that is described further, we would move into sort of option development. An infrastructure exploration agreement would have been set forward with the city or with the district, and that work basically was the impetus to work the result in an MOU with the district that allowed the further development of the project, but also the purchase of the land. So that is the stage that we're at right now. And as you can kind of see on the string of on the pathway, we're still quite early in the process. As we finish the work to kind of develop the concepts further, we'll be able to come forward with a better sense of the cost, the ultimate cost of the project. And that will allow us to enter into a term sheet around the option, the leading option. And that term sheet would then basically secure the district's support for furthering the project and allow us to prepare a business case that secured the province's portion. Once we had that approved, we would then be able to actually implement the project, which we would, at that point, prepare a project agreement that would move us through the project implementation. So as you can see, we have the MOU, we have acquired the property, and we're just moving into our technical studies. Once we have identified that option, we'll be able to secure support for moving forward into the project and securing the funding. Once that funding is secured through a business case, we would then set out a project agreement on how we would move through that project and deliver the detailed design and construction. Over the past year, as we've worked and kind of through the initial part of the MOU work, we have worked to try to articulate the real basis for the project and set some of the capacity targets for the facility. The Transit Future Plan envisions a lot of investments over the next 10 years. And as you can see, this demand curve kind of reviews or articulates 3 different growth scenarios. The blue line is really just maintaining the same level of transit services for growing population. The orange line represents the historical growth that has been achieved by the district and BC Transit working together. And then the upper line represents the growth that reflects the targeted mode share. So over the next number of years, that upper line represents the 10% transit mode share by 2040. And you can see that in the span up until 2050, the number of buses required to deliver that level of service would rise from today's level of 9 buses for conventional services, all the way up to almost 50 buses, again, for just conventional service. And so this is what we have used or will be using as we move into the concept development, that we would have a facility that was capable of parking and operating upwards of 50 buses. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I just was going to make one point too. I was fortunate enough to send the district a letter last week to Ms. Gunn that actually confirmed several transit expansions for the District of Squamish. So this council knows these all too well because you've been pitching these expansions for multiple years. It seems like multiple years at this point. So that would be to add frequency to Route 1 and 2. So that's over 2,000 hours and 2 medium duty buses. to improve our oceanfront service and South Squamish service, which is another 2,800 hours and 2 light-duty buses. And then also some off-peak improvements for Route 3, which is another 2,000 hours. So I'm happy to let council know that those initiatives have been approved. We've got a signed MOU with you, and we now have the support of the province for the matching funding. And that actually keeps you on the growing trajectory that you see here, which is great news, but it also puts pressure on our current facility, which is, you know, nearing our kind of parking capacity at this point. So it really makes the work that we're doing here quite relevant and quite important, but happy to report that to council today.
Over the past number of years, BC Transit has been involved in a number of projects and has opened new facilities in Campbell River, Cowichan Valley, and in Abbotsford. And very recently, we've been happy to open a new facility in Victoria to house Handy Dart services. In terms of other communities that are in the present, basically the same planning stages, maybe slightly ahead. Victoria and Kelowna are both planning new facilities for their communities. I think in particular, the Campbell River and Cowichan Valley projects are really great models for what could be built here in Squamish. Both of those facilities were targeted for an ultimate kind of size of around 50 buses and represent or basically have 2 to 3 maintenance bays, which is right in around the size that would be required for your community. The pictures that you see here on the left is actually the Campbell River facility, and on the left. On the other side, the parking lot is actually the Cowichan Valley one. So both of them were really sister twinned facilities. We took the opportunity of building at the same time to construct the same facility in those properties. With that, we can take a quick look at our present one. And Tim, if you wanted to jump in here, that'd be great.
Excellent. Thank you. So I just wanted to cover what currently exists for our site here, which has a fleet of, well, it's 13 now, on production way there. It's leased currently with an operating company, and they have 3 maintenance bays. They have maintenance capacity, however, we are over the bus parking options, and we have up to 6 expansion parking spots off-site, but each spot is at $550 per month, and it's very tight. So in conversation and as written in the MOU, this is the planning set that we were given to start building towards. We found ourselves a 5-acre site, and we're looking at building out with the appropriate level of maintenance bays, storage, administration, service island, and the ability to wash buses, ideally not by hand, and some BEV charging equipment, parking for employees and customers, and trying to keep it as green and clean as possible. So just wanted to highlight here, this is the property that we were able to purchase. This is a wonderful flat piece of land, 5 acres, about as ideal as you could ask for. It was reviewed and purchased finally in October of 2023, and it is now called 1090 Transit Place.
Thank you.
So right now we are in the process of RFP for consultation. That is wrapping up, and we're hoping to have that locked in the next 2 weeks. Once that happens, we will be reviewing the similar sites such as Campbell River and Cowichan Valley, as well as up in Whistler, and just take a good look at those sites and all the services they provide and how they would situate themselves well in the land area that has been provided here. Once that's done, we'll have some concept designs, and we'll be working closely with the District of Squamish's team here to discover what the best possible solution would be to present later in order to give options of costing and scheduling that could drive us in the direction that we're looking to go. Something to comment here is Fortis BC, as many of you are probably aware, is driving a pipeline through Squamish, and that does impact the current property. And that is under negotiations right now with between Fortis BC and BC Transit, and that will be running on the south side of the property. The impact of that will be determined near future and will be shared once that becomes present. One of the things we wanted to highlight is our plans of community engagement, stakeholder involvement. This is just not a full list, but just an example size of what we're looking to accomplish here is communicating with each of these groups to really understand what the community is looking for, what our First Nations people are looking for, the District of Squamish, school districts, companies in the area, and how we impact everyone, and laying out our best possible options going forward. So part of this is using our consultation teams and local interest groups and focusing on inclusive engagement and respecting the local traditions and just understanding your priorities going forward. So we just want to focus on concerns and considerations and design choices and graphic choices going forward, so that at the end of the day, we're producing a facility that everyone walks away proud of. So currently, we are in the planning and design, which typically runs around 2-year mark. And that will lead into construction dependent on, as noted before, project term sheets and project agreements based off the agreed upon concept drawings and design. And that, of course, will only shift to the right depending on the availability of funding and approval by all parties involved. So as noted, next steps is complete this concept designing, work towards creating a project term sheet. This is a non-binding commitment and endorses a business case submission. This allows us to create our project agreement, which becomes a binding commitment. And once that's all created and the business case is submitted, we'll have a detailed design created and construction would begin.
Thank you very much for your attention, and yeah, we'd be happy to take any questions at this time. Thank you very much for the presentation. Council, questions? Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Thank you, through the chair. Thanks for the update, and exciting to see that this is well on its way. I am curious if through this process there's the opportunity to explore federal grant support for delivery of the project. We've done that in any of the other examples.
The prior projects that we've been able to do over the last number of years benefited from the Investing in Public Infrastructure project or program with the federal government. That program is completed and closed now for submissions. Over the last couple of years, there's been talk about a permanent transit fund. And I know that you were approved for some of the, can't remember which stream it's called, but there's a couple streams in that program. So the one just really focuses on renewal and smaller things. That is the one that's been approved. The other stream is the Metro agreement stream. And we are waiting to sort of see where that's going to land for communities of the size of the district. It is still unknown.
Yeah. Appreciate that. And being in the midst of a federal election is never a good time to figure out what funding is going to be available in 6 months' time. So appreciate that's a bit of a wait and see. I believe last time we spoke about this, there was some consideration around the implications of how this project gets financed and its impact on our debt servicing capacity. And I just want to confirm that we've landed in a place that where if the folks at BC Transit are taking on the costs, even though it lands as an operating agreement for us, it doesn't impact our debt servicing capacity. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question through the chair. No, we haven't had a confirmation. However, BC Transit has done operating agreements in the past, and we have been in connection with their CFO. Still in discussions. We really need to get down to the terms of the agreements and then go through the auditors.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And then great to hear that you have some experience doing this in other locations. Just wonder how much upfront conversation there is with our staff in terms of some of the lessons learned that we have for construction projects in the district. So flood construction level, archaeological assessments, what we love to call the Squamish premium for labor and construction. There's all kinds of different titles around it, but just trying to ground truth as much as possible early in the process.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Dora Gunn, Transportation Planner. While I have been quite involved in this project to date, we will be having our facilities staff on board as well moving forward. And so it'll be a joint between myself and them. And so they will definitely be able to share those lessons learned.
And if I could just add from a BC Transit perspective, so as Tim outlined, just through this whole consultation stage that we go through, we'll be actively involving District of Squamish staff as we have in the past. And obviously, as we get closer to the project, it becomes more and more important to make sure we understand all the considerations that need to be taken into account.
That's great. Thank you. And then I do want to just do a shout out of excitement that we finally got some approval from the province to expand our servicing. Thank you. And I'm just curious if the approval for the oceanfront and South Squamish components will be in time for the coming summer months, or if that's still to be determined.
Yes, I can give you the approximate timing for all those expansions. Because it involves new vehicle procurement, we're kind of stuck to our procurement cycles, which unfortunately right now are slated for January. Unfortunately not an ideal time for some of the great transit service that we want to provide for the summer. But at the end of the day, we've got the expansion. We'll work with the district to make sure we implement the best service that we can for that area with the hours and the buses that we have. And then next summer we'll be good to go.
Councillor Pettingill, then French.
Yeah, darn it, pipeline is a challenge. Hopefully with this sort of lower density use, there's still an acceptable level of risk there. But setting that aside, I do hear interest for large vehicle charging options. And I wonder if there's anything, and just sort of setting aside technological limitations where they are currently, from a process or other policy that would preclude other large vehicle users from using the electrification infrastructure, either as just a means to accelerate a broader transition or even to provide offsetting revenue. Are those things that could be theoretically considered, or are there obstacles there?
I think there are a lot of obstacles, right? Whether it comes with security, whether it comes with how do you charge back. BC Transit isn't really set up as a revenue organization. And so I know some of these things do come with their challenges. I don't think anything's necessarily off the table, but it certainly is going to require a lot of collaboration and exploration before that can be said to be, a really viable option or opportunity.
Yeah, Sorry, I'll just add through the chair. And we're still in the early days of our electrification program. So we're really, we're rolling out a significant number of buses in Victoria this year. Next year, we'll start rolling out some other resources. So I think as we learn and develop our program as well, again, these are considerations that we'll be taking into account. But to Errol's point, it's a little bit more complicated than it looks on the surface, but I think it's definitely something that we're probably going to hear from a lot of other councils that we meet with when we talked about electrification, because there seems to be quite a bit of demand from even municipal fleets to other larger organizations that are looking for charging infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. It's good to hear some good news stories, and yeah, I sort of assumed there might be some challenges, but it is something maybe to keep in our minds as we're figuring out how to do this all. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor French.
Thank you, Mayor Herford. And I'm curious to know, thanks for the context on the Campbell River, Cowichan Valley, and some of the other recent projects. So curious to know if there is an opportunity, has been an opportunity to take things from those projects to reduce our costs here. So I'm thinking like architectural drawings that can just be plunked down anywhere British Columbia. Is that just a pipe dream on my part, or is there some reality there?
No, not at all, actually. That is our intent in terms of how to make the best use of even the $400,000 that you have approved through the MOU. Those projects were constructed and put into service before COVID. So the pricing, the costing that we would get, it's hard to estimate. We can't really apply just escalation percentages over the last number of years. So the very first action that we're going to do is to take that drawing set from Cowichan Valley and Campbell River and just get it costed today without really making any notable changes. We're also looking at the Whistler facility, which was constructed in 2009. Before the Olympics, and we would look to that facility, ensuring that we meet current building codes and other kind of prospective regulations, and get that construction costed as well, because they are slightly different in terms of how they are constructed. And with those two examples, we hope to be able to establish maybe the most cost-effective construction methodology for the Squamish facility.
Okay, and my final question is a little bit therapeutic for myself and just as much a comment as it is a question. When you showed the slide indicating the parking for the staff and the customers at our new facility, got my brain racing. If we can't get our transit operators and our transit employees to use the transit system to get to and from work, that's a problem. So I'm curious to know about end of trip facility planning and that type of infrastructure within the facility. Please tell me it's all going to be there and our transit employees will have good options for walking, rolling, and riding to work if they choose to do that.
So I think I'll handle that one. I think that is that's transit service design, and I think as we progress the facility process, I'll be working in our planning team. We'll be working with your staff to make sure that we're maximizing those options as well, fully recognizing that yes, our operators not only do a great job driving transit, but may also want to take transit to and from facility. Obviously, there's a lot of options there from a business perspective that are in that area. So making sure that we have good service within that region is obviously going to be of importance as we get into the service planning. So I'll let the infrastructure guys worry about the facility, and then I'll work with our planning staff and your planning staff to make sure that we got the services there that they need.
The latest, like the facility in Victoria, was our first LEED Gold facility. That program in general does require that there is a lot of emphasis on integrating how employees are getting to work and making other options other than driving attractive, right? So yes, the facility will be equipped with washrooms that have showers and the ability for individuals who want to choose to bike to work have the facilities they need to feel fresh after that ride.
Councillor Hamilton?
Yeah, thanks very much. Great news on the expanded frequency on routes 1 and 2 in the oceanfront. Great news to hear. On the electrification side of things, do the Cowichan or Campbell River facilities, do those have electrical charging stations with them, or is that would that be unique to the Squamish compared to those two?
Those facilities were constructed before BC Transit had articulated its transitioning of the fleet, and therefore are not equipped presently with those. Those facilities will be retrofitted with charging infrastructure as we kind of progress through the program of electrifying the fleet.
And speaking to that program of electrifying the fleet, yeah, can you speak to a few minutes to what is that program and what we might expect in the coming years with respect to electrification of the bus fleet in Squamish? Are we talking a few buses on the road by 2030 or what?
Yeah, maybe I'll start just with in general of our low carbon fleet program. So as was articulated, we've joined behind the Clean BC plan. And clearly, as a Crown agency that is in the business of transportation, we're one of the larger GHG emitters within the provincial envelope. So there was definitely a desire on both ends for us to get aligned behind that program. As I mentioned before, we've already embarked in kind of phase 1 of our electrification program, which is going to see us deliver chargers and electric vehicles to 8 different locations by the end of next year. Victoria, Sunshine Coast, Whistler, Powell River, Nelson, and I believe Kelowna. So we're moving that program forward in facilities where they're not new builds. So this is actually going into currently constructed facilities, figuring out how to get the power to those sites, how to get the charging infrastructure, how to make the yard layouts work. I think, and then obviously on the fleet end, we have made some commitments to continuing to invest in battery electric buses. We're currently have 2 different suppliers that we're sourcing buses from. And I think what you'll see is as our diesel buses start to age out, they will be just continually replaced with battery electric buses as the supply starts to come into the system. For Squamish, with the plans that we have in place and with the dollars and the investment that we know that's going to be involved, I don't think would be a viable option for us to currently invest in a leased facility that we don't even lease, but that the operating company leases. So I think really this facility build is an opportunity, and I'll let Errol speak a little bit to what the plan with this current facility would be, but it's obviously a great opportunity for us to plan charging infrastructure as we build, and then make sure that we have the fleet that comes in behind that. I'm going to just assume that we wouldn't see 100% quick transition immediately to battery electric bus, but I would love to see some battery electric buses here the day we open the facility, if we have the infrastructure available.
Yeah, I think that the fleet transition is occurring sort of as replacement is required. So and is focused on particular vehicle types first. So we've been focusing on our heavy duty, so a standard 40-foot bus as kind of the first opportunity. That is the platform that has the highest maturity, right, in the industry. We are also looking now to move into the light duty category of buses. And in terms of medium duty, the market is very small. And so the transition of medium duty buses or the platform may be the last to sort of transition. But ultimately, the goal is to transition the fleet by 2040. So as the replacement cycle of buses comes due, then we would be matching up and aiming to replace any diesel buses or even CNG buses that come due for replacement with battery electric. And then figuring out which facility around the province would be the best opportunity to electrify. As kind of noted before, the investment to put charging infrastructure is reasonably high. And so then we've been focusing on facilities at this point that we own or have a secure hold, whether it's lease kind of right to be there for the long term. So that obviously has precluded up to this time anyways, the District of Squamish, being that facility is leased by a contracted operator. So as we move to invest this in money in the present facility or in the new facility, we'll be able to map that facility into the transition plan.
Yeah, just follow up. The buses we have in Squamish, are those heavy duty or medium duty? Because I know they're shorter than the normal.
They're medium duty. They're medium duty,
yeah. Thank you for the presentation and I found the visual around sort of what would be needed to hit our mode shift really valuable piece. I suppose when you're building a new facility, I know it's a delicate dance to figure out how future-proof you build the thing and just at what point that next piece is. And I know that there's been ongoing discussions over the years around the regional transit piece. And I just wonder what capacity, and I know that there's so many variables with this. We just treat like numbers of buses. So if we're able to move either through a new transit futures piece that bumps us to that level or above, which is what maybe regional would drive a level above that, what sort of capacity exists on that site? And with this sizable capital investment, if you're looking at transitioning the fleet by 2040, this thing's going to be in operation with 2030-ish was the timeline I saw there. How are you building in what that next capacity step is in that longer time frame? I'm just want to make sure that I think we all want to make sure that we're not opening something that's going to be at capacity within the first 3 or 5 years, given the amount of capital investment required. So can you speak to that sort of future piece?
Yeah, I mean, I think the demand curves that we have give a strong case for making sure that the facility can handle 50 buses and feeling reasonably confident that 50 buses provides us with upwards of 20 years, right? In total. I think as we do more detailed layouts of the site, we'll be able to establish whether or not the assumption around how much land we purchased can accommodate 50 or 55 or 60, right? So we will seek to maximize the utility of that land parcel. It has the benefit of being a flat rectangle, which we don't always get. So it's a really great thing to actually be able to work with a flat rectangle. We have worked on much more challenging sites than this, and just walking the site today, it looks really great in terms of the ability to sort of map out various different configurations, and we'll just look to try to make sure it's the best it can be.
And sorry, just to follow up, Mayor, too, on the Sea to Sky regional front, that has been included in our initial consultation work that we're looking at. So it was referenced on one of the slides there, but I think the last time BC Transit did a service analysis on Sea to Sky Regional, we pegged it at about 8 heavy duty buses. So the facility plan that's going on would look at having that space available when we open the facility.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Yeah, and there's not very many flat rectangles that come through this room either. So that is an excellent site. I'm happy to see that it's that it'll be used in this way. I think it'll serve us all very well. Council, the recommendation is to receive the report for information. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor French. Any comments on what we've seen so far? Go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks. Let's make it happen.
Go ahead, Councillor French.
Thanks. Let's make it happen.
And I just thank you for the foreshadowing of the expansions that are coming for us. I think I mean we collectively have been pushing for them for a long time, so I'm happy to hear that that's advanced. Of course, we'd like to have them, you know, two years ago, so the timeline of implementation is challenging, but I know that we'll work to maximize what we can in the interim while that procurement piece runs its course. So thank you for all the work on this file and that broader piece around transit expansion, because it is something that I think when we looked at those growth numbers, you had some growth numbers in your slide deck. The new folks to the community are often coming with the expectation that there is transit service, and I think we're all working hard to sort of meet that expectation, and that's a dramatic shift from how do we get these folks that have this entrenched way of getting around out of their vehicles and into and onto transit. So I'm happy to see that we're able to step further into that space to meet those expectations of our community together. So thank you very much for that. I'll go to Councillor Penning and I'll call the question.
Yeah, happy to see this presentation and lots of good news here. I was going to ask a question, but maybe we can just sort of cover it going forward. Just my understanding is that in transit route planning, we have a higher degree of influence than we might expect to have here. We've had a really good collaborative relationship. My understanding is sort of route planning, we influence the design a little more than we might a transit facility. And I just think in terms of the public understanding and myself of what influence we have and who is contributing and how and so on, that may be important to clarify. But thank you.
Yeah, I think we'll see some updates along the way of those that chart that looked a lot like a bus route map that was presented to us earlier. So with that, I'll call. Do you anything yet? Go ahead.
Yeah, just briefly. Earlier today, we adopted the spring amendment of our financial plan bylaw, looking forward the next 5 years. A big driver of our tax increases in Squamish are for transit service level increases, and those are not possible without this transit facility. And so thanks to your team and our staff for doing the work in getting the initial pieces in place. This has already been 2.5 years in the making. So these processes are slow, but I'm grateful to previous council who has put kind of the wheels in motion, and like my council colleagues, looking forward to getting it over the line as soon as possible, so that our community can see those expansions over time, both locally and fingers crossed regionally. One day we will get there too. But thanks for the work.
Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here today. And and thank you. It is. Thank you. Make sure you get an opportunity. Make sure you take an opportunity to go down to investigate the beach for purely operational reasons. Yep. Okay, Council, we're on to our final item here, which is the Red Bridge Land Development Agreement Amendment. Maybe we'll take a quick, let's take a quick 5-minute, just let everyone get set up and then we'll get underway. It is a bit stuffy in here. So we'll recess for 5 minutes. Okay, welcome back. We're on our final agenda item today. This is the Red Bridge Land Development Agreement Amendment, and I will turn it over to staff to run us, introduce themselves and run us through the presentation.
So good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Carrie Hamilton, planner for the District of Squamish, presenting to you today the Red Bridge Land Development Agreement amendments. So the purpose of today is to present for Council's consideration two proposed amendments to the existing Red Bridge Land Development Agreement, known as the LDA for short. The amendments are technical amendments due to the recent change in land ownership and outdated legal descriptions referenced in the agreement, and the amenity phase delivery. So that's to amend the work benefits package delivery phase for 2 amenities to support residential housing occupancy of 93 units. So the Red Bridge LDA was first secured in October 2014 and as part of the creation of the Comprehensive Development Zone number 77. It has had the following amendments authorized by Council since, which is shown on the slide. Most relevant, the recent changes were in 2023 due to the bridge timing and location changes, 2024 where amendments were approved for a driveway access clause, and today's amendments come 11 years after the original agreement and are seeking support for 2 following changes. The first one is a set of amendments are of housekeeping nature. The amendments include one of the existing landowners has been removed of blind channels, and they sold their property to one of the other existing landowners and should be removed from the LDA. The other technical amendment is for improperly identified land and legal descriptions in the LDA. These errors are likely due to years of amendments, land consolidation, and subdivision since this original 2014 approval, and has resulted in different parcel identifiers and legal description that needs changing. It is in both parties' best interest to amend the agreement in alignment with the current ownership and legal descriptions of the land. The second set of amendments are for completion of 2 Schedule D work benefit package amenities. And these are to change it from phase 1 to phase 2. And this is related to works for the Scott Crescent Highway intersection and the corridor trail improvements. So phase 1 occupancy is anticipated shortly on April 30th, 2025, while phase 2 occupancy is anticipated this summer on June 30th, 2025. It is not anticipated that any further extensions will be needed, but both improvements are currently delayed due to senior government approvals with reasons beyond the developer's control. Some considerations for supporting these second amendments include phase 1 vehicle access will only be from Clark Drive and Upper Scott Crescent until the highway works are completed. Emergency vehicle access from Highway 99 will be maintained throughout construction, and the fire department has confirmed there are no concerns with this approach. A temporary pathway is already in place to ensure phase 1 residents have pedestrian access to the highway and corridor trail, and transportation staff are supportive of the temporary design. The existing corridor trail, there is a STAT right-of-way already secured, and this ensures that the temporary corridor trail connection is maintained during construction, leaving no concern for ensuring corridor trail access through the Highway 99 construction works. The last one is the amendments will help 93 residents move in as scheduled, supporting the Squamish Housing Action Plan and the district's 2025 housing targets. Staff is recommending that Council authorize amendments to the Red Bridge Land Development Agreement as presented to Council today in the report. Or alternatively, Council could authorize the technical LDA amendments only and choose to not authorize the phase changes from phase 1 to phase 2. This alternative recommendation would delay occupancy of 93 phase 1 residential units. That concludes my presentation for the afternoon, and welcome Council's feedback.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor Herford. Councillor Anderson submitted a few questions, and I'm going to ask his questions on behalf of him in light of his inability to participate today. So in the current Section 219 agreement under prior to development of the land, Section 11B2, there's a reference to a temporary access statutory right-of-way across the Northlands to the pedestrian bike bridge referred to in the amenity benefit package. So one question is, why temporary? The proposed alignment to the bridge has long since been changed. The right-of-way will connect the switchback trail section descending the slope and Councillor Anderson suggests here on district and private land to Scott Crescent. So why would this route be pedestrian or for pedestrians become potentially redundant in the future?
So through the mayor, that clause is so that the development of the Southlands could be developed. And it was these clauses were all requirements prior to the Southland being developed. And the intention was that it would be temporary for the purpose of prior to the north being developed, and that we would have a park in the future that is secured during phase 6 occupancy, and that district land will then become the pedestrian access across that site. And that's why the clause is just written as a temporary access across the site, so that in advance of having the land and the district park land, we would be able to have access across the site.
Okay, and then this potentially ties into the private property that could potentially be landlocked through this development process. So is that not the same proposed route as is addressed in Schedule D, Item 6?
Through the mayor, it's not the same route. Yeah.
Okay. And then regarding Schedule C, Item 2, Valley Cliff Trails, provide cash contribution towards Valley Cliff Trail improvements to link Hospital Hill, Northridge, and Valley Cliff neighborhoods to the upper Mount Blind Channel area. Valley Cliff and Hospital Hill residents have been asking for safety upgrades to both of those alternate trail routes connecting the top of the escarpment bench to Scott Crescent for about 17 years. And apparently there was a wooden staircase there at one point that burned. The more direct route has been identified as too steep or not too steep. It's identified as steep in the safe routes to school map for a few years now. The other switchback route, which could be used by seniors, strollers, or bikes, requires surface remediation on the district land portion. And the recently presented transportation master plan, according to Councillor Anderson, misidentified the location of the Valley Cliff Trail needed upgrades as being on the easterly Maple Drive end of the trail, which according again to Councillor Anderson is in good condition and requires no necessary upgrade. The pedestrian trail connects Valley Cliff and Hospital Hill to downtown and the 3 schools. So the question here is, can staff explain anticipated timing for project plans and safety upgrade works for the 2 routes connecting the Valley Cliff Trail at the top of the bank to Scott Crescent?
Certainly, through the mayor. The error identified by Councillor Anderson in the transportation master plan is aware, our transportation staff are aware of it, and it was just a misidentified label. There is funds that were negotiated through this through the land development agreement, and there are funds to upgrade and make some safety improvements to the trail on the district section. And as part of phase 1, we have actually already received those funds. There are 146,000 roughly that we've received from the applicant, and our transportation staff are aware that we'll be receiving these funds this year and are looking to consider how to consider some potential safety improvements to that trail that we can do in the short term, because the transportation master plan, I think, identifies that area as an improvement in the long term, like a major improvement in the long term. So they are looking at doing something short term with those funds that we received.
And then just follow up on that, the amendment that we're contemplating here doesn't impact the delivery of those funds or the phasing of anything related to that, just to be extra clear. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor French, did you have questions of your own? Thank you for channeling Councillor Anderson in his absence, but I'll give you an option for yours if you need.
Yeah, I have one, and it's a follow-up to one of Councillor Anderson's regarding the adjacent property. My reading of what's come before us for today's meeting is, my interpretation is that there's nothing here that changes any of that issue and any of the previous discussion. So I'm wondering if staff could just update us on where is that situation at, specifically ensuring that the private adjacent landowners have secure and permanent ongoing access to their property.
Certainly. So through the mayor, that was approved, that amendment, particularly for clause 11BV, was approved by council in 2024. We have made these amendments to the LDA. It hasn't been signed and registered because as we went and signed to register it, we noted these legal and parcel identifier deficiencies, and we're trying to come before council to amend that prior to registering. So that is still in the course to do whether or not the outcome of today's meeting, so we can still proceed with those. We're currently just we're also relooking with the applicant a new driveway access agreement, which is compliant with that new land development agreement language as well. So we're currently working through that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Stoner, then Pettingill.
Thank you. Through the chair, are you aware of what the rationale was for requiring the highway improvements to be done prior to phase 1 occupancy? I can my assumption would be is that you don't have the 90-something folks driving through the Valley Cliff neighborhood, but is that accurate?
Certainly through council, I can't fully speak to it because I wasn't present in the 2014 negotiations, but my assumption would be that ideally we tend to want to have all of our roadworks completed prior to having occupancy onto these sites, but sometimes there's these challenges, unforeseen challenges that we can't foresee in 2014, that such as weather and timelines of when construction would be completed. And so I think it's just they're a little off with these timelines as a result.
Appreciate that can happen, especially over the length of time that this project has taken to come to completion. But they're only requesting a 2-month change. So I'm curious why we're even considering it. It's just 2 months, so why not just wait?
Through the mayor, my understanding is that if they can bring these residents in there by April 30th with these changes, and if we don't have these changes, their construction timelines are 5 weeks right now to complete the highway works, but it's undetermined how long the Ministry of Transportation and might take to approve it and open it up fully. So I think they're concerned around what that timeline could look like for them.
I'll let you ponder that, Councillor Pettingill.
So given that last comment, like the proposals to attach some of these changes to phase 2, I think what I just heard is that we may get another report saying actually we need to be phase 3 because MOTI still isn't ready. Is that sort of possibly where we're headed, or?
The mayor, no, sorry, that might be misinterpreted that way, but 5 weeks is, it gives them some leverage, I think, to get people in prior to, in a phased program. So.
Sorry, but my understanding is for the things we want delivered, that requires some MOTI approvals. And so if MOTI is still slow, we may sort of be having this conversation again around phase 2 and how do we get the phase 2 folks in because everything else is ready, but the MOTI stuff is still not there, or.
Through the mayor, my understanding is that those would be kind of checks and balances. It's not anticipated to be delays that previously would have gone through like a review and a report, and it wouldn't have been the same kind of delays that they've experienced in the approval process. I can have our engineers potentially speak to their experience in these approvals and how long they might take, but the anticipation is that this would all be approved by the phase 2 and that there's no anticipation to come back to council to ask for a further extension. And if there was an extension, they would potentially have to just push their phase 2 occupancy back another month or something like that. But they're not anticipating
to come back to council for another amendment.
All right, thank you. And then another thing that I've been sort of going back and forth in my mind, on the one hand, I think we've lamented that sometimes we sign these land development agreements and then the development doesn't happen for a long time, and then the LDA doesn't seem satisfactory, and we've talked about expiry dates and so on and so forth. And here, we have the developer wanting to open up an LDA. It seems that there's benefit to the developer, but on the flip side, they're asking for a couple months, and it's things out of their control. But I guess I'm wondering if staff can speak to a little bit about the decision about why not use this as an opportunity to look for some of the things we might have wanted to see in an LDA versus just the sort of recommendation here.
Certainly, through the mayor, land development agreements are kind of negotiations between the district and the developer. And the idea is to secure the desired intent of, to legally secure these desired intentions and amenities. And sometimes there are small shifts and changes that happen along the lifespan of the land development agreement. And it's staff's perspective that this one particularly is an opportunity where we feel that these amendments were out of the developer's control, and that we would like to be a good partner in supporting new residential units moving into the community in support of our policy to support more housing and people moving into the community. So we feel like it's a small amount of time that they're shifting, wherein if we look at the 2023 amendment where there was some bridge timing changes, which were closer to like 2 years, that's when the district came back and asked for more money or more amenities and more support. So we feel like this one particularly is not in need of that negotiation.
Mr. Vilniscus, you'd like to chime in on this?
Yes, thank you. Just to add to the conversation, that normally at this point where we're getting close to occupancy, a lot of these units have been sold. So we're not, the developer is not the only stakeholder here. Now we're looking at potentially 93 residents. And we know that the time around moving is very sensitive with property exchanges. People have to sell properties to buy properties, and they have to move out. So it has a broader implication than just the developer in this case. And the improvements that we are discussing, I believe all of them we have security for. So we know they're going to get done. It's just a matter of few months.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks. And great segue into my question, which is, I'd like to understand what the potential impact of this is on the owners, those presumably 93 owners of the units there. Does this, so at this moment, on April 22nd, they're uncertain as to whether they're going to have occupancy on April 30th. So I'm not sure whether it's actually doing them a service to have occupancy on April 30th, because certainly they have plans to not have occupancy by April 30th. Maybe I'm wrong. It's very hard to tell. So there's my question. Drifting there. Thank you. What impact do you foresee this change having on the owners of the properties with respect to their potential move-in dates? Other than the obvious, they'd be able to move in. I don't have a question there that you can answer. I don't see, I see this is a comment. I see a potential challenge for the residents who are going to move in if all of a sudden they have a mortgage due as of April 30th, because it not only occupancy doesn't just trigger living there, it triggers paying for the mortgage. So.
There's a lot of pieces here. And thank you for trying to turn your comment into a question and then recognizing it as a comment. Was there a question in there that anyone felt they would like to address, or are you just ready for where I go? Okay. Thank you for that. I'm curious and perhaps I should know this, but is Scott Crescent meant to be, is the highway access always meant to support two directions on Scott Crescent, or is the future state in Scott Crescent and out? And just trying to understand how different this orientation is from the final built state.
Yes, thanks for the question. To Mayor Dave Merrow, Director of Development Engineering. So Scott Crescent in its future state will be two-way vehicle traffic, but will remain a right in, right out only highway intersection. To add some context to the discussion, if I may, the highway intersection work was approved through a separate servicing agreement. That servicing agreement was separated because it did need Ministry of Transportation approval. Ministry of Transportation has approved the design. It's under construction now. Construction is progressing well. Paving is a bit of an unknown time. The time frame of paving is a bit of an unknown at this point in time. MOTI has no further approvals required, but they just do need to understand that the work was constructed in accordance with their approved design. Staff have also done a significant amount of due diligence with respect to whether occupancy of this first building would be safe and effective from a safety perspective, fire services, emergency services, from a water and sewer and utility perspective. And we've consulted a lot of internal groups, and we are confident that with all of the works being complete, with the exception of the highway intersection, and with the provisions that Ms. Hamilton mentioned with the active transportation temporary measures that are in place to ensure people can access along Scott Crescent and along Corridor Trail, staff are assured from a technical perspective that occupancy will be acceptable without that highway intersection in place.
Okay, thank you for both the answer to my question and the more context. The offsite around like Upper and Lower Clark Drive, that all the works there are needed or that were required of this development have been completed, and the signage, like we're ready for the traffic that is about to happen there should this be successful?
To Mayor, yes, that's correct. There are a few minor outstanding things that will be resolved prior to occupancy.
Okay, thank you. And the one of the updates was around removing a landowner, but that's not removing, that's a landowner of the area that's covered by this, not changing the scope of the LDA, right? Like it's removing an owner, not a parcel. I just want to make sure I have this piece right.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Council, any other questions of clarity? We have a recommendation before us if someone's ready to move it. Councillor Stoner?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. I'll second that. Would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, when I first read through this, I was hesitant and was contemplating moving the alternative recommendation, but appreciate Mr. Merrow's further contextual components around the safety of being able to enable occupancy of these first 93 units while ensuring the safety of the folks who are going to live there, the folks who are still working on site, and the remainder of the community who will have that additional vehicle traffic and hopefully some bike and pedestrian traffic too. But appreciate that there's also no outstanding MOTI or MOTT, as we now call them, approvals necessary. It's just really waiting for a paving window, it sounds like, for a weather window. And that seems like it's a reasonable request at this time, especially given that it's just a 2-month delay. So with phase 2 expected at end of June, hopefully that weather window shows up and the paving can get done. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? Councillor Pettingill, then French.
Yeah, I will support this. I'm not sure, had we not had the bridge amendment and some deeper conversations around changes, whether I'd be in the same place or not. But I think that does seem like it was the more appropriate time and place to look at more significant LDA adjustments. And I know we did make some. So on balance and given what's requested here, I think I'm willing to support this. It does sort of, as I've listened to the discussion, give me some pause in terms of, to the degree people are dependent on a very specific timeline for the place they're going to be living, and how many things are interacting with that, and sort of lucky given our agenda that this was on at all before the date. So not quite sure what to do with that, but that's could have a very significant impact unless these are just landlords and tenancy hasn't been sorted out yet. But even then, that's possible. And so, yeah, for 93 folks, this could be a big deal. These sorts of decisions. So just leave it at that. Something to chew on a little more, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor Herford. I'm speaking in support of the motion and the staff recommendation. I think it's a realistic request at this point. And even if this paves the way for just one of those 93 people to move in on April 30th or May the 1st, then I think we've done the right thing here.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks very much. Like Councillor Stoner, I was certainly wavering on this one before this meeting. I sincerely hope that this is an actual benefit to the owners. That's the piece that's not clear to me. But I can certainly imagine that there could be a considerable number of folks wanting to move in and would want to move in on April 30th or May 1st, with or without that highway piece in place. So I sincerely hope they're able to do that. I hope it's okay to get trucks up and down that road. I assume it is. And so with that, I will be supporting the motion. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll be supporting the motion. I think I've heard some solid reasoning behind all of the pieces of this. And the main piece around occupancy, I'm satisfied that the folks moving in there will be safe to do so, and it'll have minimal impact on the community. Otherwise, I think that generally these LDAs are to ensure that certain things happen at certain times, which is exactly what we're talking about here. I'm very confident that because of the conversation here today, that that the things will happen. Just the timing is off, and we're secure that we will have those improvements to the highway when the rest of the process, approvals and build out, happen. I might feel differently if we were being pitched a 6 or 8 month or a 12-month change, but that's not what is here. I think it's very reasonable, and I'm happy to support a couple months grace on a very complex project that interacts with the nuances of our provincial counterparts. And also, I think that we strive to be reasonable here. And I think that when we have 93 new residents moving into the community, it's good to start on the right foot with a reasonable piece of regulation that allows them to advance on their timeline while ensuring that we do get the amenities, the amenity, or in this case, I'd say a piece of infrastructure that improvement that we need. So I'm happy to support and welcome 93 new residents to the community. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Councillor Stoner, yes, do you have something you'd like to?
I'd like to move a motion to terminate this meeting.
Councillor Hamilton seconds that, and we are all in favor. Thank you very much, everybody. Good work today. Thank you, staff.